first to Ukraine, where the capital in Kyiv has been rocked by explosions after a series of Russian missile and drone attacks. Several high-rise buildings are on fire. Ukraine's Prime Minister says for the first time during the war, the country's main government building has been damaged. Helicopters are trying to douse the flames. Officials say at least 3 people have been killed and nearly 20 injured in Kyiv. Well, let's cross to our correspondent Sarah Rainsford, who is in the capital. And Sarah, this is being seen as a highly significant attack.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm standing now is just at the bottom of the hill that leads up to the main government quarters here. This is right in the heart of official Kyiv, the city centre, where all the administrative buildings are. The parliament's up there, the cabinet of ministers is up there, the presidential palace is a little further up in the distance. And it was the cabinet of ministers, so the main government building here, that was hit in this latest aerial attack by Russia. Now, this was a combination of drones and missiles launched across Ukraine by Russia in the early hours of this morning. And according to the numbers that we've had from the Air Force this morning, it was the biggest ever attack of this war. More than 800 drones and missiles that were fired. And I think hitting a government building for the first time is something that will shake people here. It is a symbolic attack, a symbolic moment. This hasn't been achieved before. The city centre is extremely well defended, of course, because of the strategic importance of all the buildings here. So that is a new twist in this war. And I think the reaction from ministers here this morning, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, calling this a serious escalation by Russia, saying that it shows that Vladimir Putin rejects diplomacy and that instead, as they've put it, he is escalating his terror.
And there have been casualties. How many bodies do we know so far which have been recovered?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This morning we're talking about this building, the government building, but as far as we know, at this point at least, there were no casualties at this site. We're waiting to hear news from there. But what we are hearing is about strikes on residential buildings in Kyiv itself and also across Ukraine. And at one block of flats, it has been confirmed that a woman and a baby have been killed in this overnight attack, and that rescuers are looking, we understand, for a third body. So yet more children, yet more civilians killed in this war, and there are other casualties in other cities across Ukraine. It was a massive attack, and the whole point for Russia of launching so many drones, hundreds of drones at one time, is to overwhelm the air defences for the missiles to get through, and that's what they've done again overnight, and that's why the attack here has had such a huge impact.
Sarah Rainsford, for now, thank you. That's our correspondent Sarah Rainsford in Kyiv. Now, we can also speak to a former news operations editor at the Kyiv Independent. I spoke to him earlier and he's been describing what's been happening there.
We assume that government buildings have been targeted in the past, but the air defences have normally kept out drones and missiles. This is the first time that a drone has made it through and hit one, and obviously you see the pictures of it still on fire at the moment. The Ukraine's Air Force has just said that there were 805 kamikaze drones launched during this attack, which makes it the largest of the full-scale invasion so far. I think the previous record was around 550. So this is a pretty significant escalation in Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities.
And what more do we know about casualties at the moment?
As you said, I mean, the details are still coming through. It's changing quite rapidly. At least 3 killed in Kyiv and 20 injured. But the Kyiv Independent has a reporter at one of the attack sites at the moment. And they were told that 2 of the fatalities were a young woman living on the 6th floor of a residential building who'd just recently given birth. And both she and her newborn baby were thrown from the building by the blast wave of a Russian drone. So there's some really grim scenes unfolding in Kyiv this morning. And
tell us about the impact of these drones. We know that 800 have been used in this single attack overnight. Is that right?
Yeah, they're not all explosive ones. Some of them are like decoy drones that are just used to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses. But there's a really big psychological sort of terrorism effect on this, basically. So last night, I don't think anyone got much sleep in Kyiv, because from around 7:30, the air raid alert went off last night. And then it was just constant sounds of air defense. And then as these drones make their way over, They have very loud engines. The Ukrainians call them mopeds because they sound like moped engines. And as well as the damage that they cause when they make it through and they hit, just the psychological effect of hearing them flying over your apartment building, one after the other during these attacks is pretty terrifying.
And how are people reacting to this attack in local communities at the moment?
There's obviously shock because something like this is obviously horrific, but there's also we're so sadly used to these attacks in Kyiv. I've lost count of how many there have been this year, despite the fact that Donald Trump has been leading a peace process. But they're just getting bigger and bigger. And there was a bit of a pause while Russia was pretending to go along with the peace process. And now they've given up all pretense of pretending that there's any chance that they're going to stop the war. And they're only escalating them.
And that was Chris York from the Kyiv Independent.